Gaining.
Time for Storm Watch at the Weather Channel, being sponsored by Rayovac. We'll look at our flooding rains that are still a major problem, disastrous into Texas. And we'll also talk about the tropics, our tropical update, where we'll begin the Storm Watch, looking at, well, first of all, some action in the Pacific, also in the Caribbean, and looking at a couple of areas of interest, one in the Caribbean and a couple of additional ones across the Atlantic. Let's look at this up close and personal. Area of storminess here in the Western Caribbean. Just keep an eye here. We're going to continue to monitor this in case something should happen. A spot where not unlikely something could take place. Still a bit of shear in some spots, but that may be the case additionally. Even if nothing pops up here, some of this moisture, just the storminess here, may be pulled northward. It may bring some of this rain into Florida. Even if nothing develops, the moisture may be utilized toward us. So we'll continue to keep a watchful eye toward that. Something happening aloft, way up there, with a trough. It's digging even a little bit deeper the next few days. You see those clouds kind of pushing on to the east? That's from the shear or the rip going on. That's why you see a couple of areas of disturbed weather that are starting to, well, try and work their way westward. A little wave down there, trying to make it back this way, trying to move on. And you look and you see those high clouds, the high wispy clouds way up there, kind of a hostile environment. And you have a trough aloft, a bit of a rip, works to rip or shear a system apart. For this thing to intensify, it needs to be in a kind of a safe harbor. It's high pressure aloft, so that little pre-existing spin beneath it can start to intensify. Not the case. Not a real likely spot. Too much unfavorable for it aloft for that to take place. Some storminess here off the Cape Verde region, but now climatologically, not exactly the time of the year for many waves to make that long trek across the Atlantic. Plus, you can also see the evidence of the shear here. Those high clouds being blown off that direction as well. So don't expect much here. Wow, pretty active. What was at one point Madeline, now just a batch of moisture. Has been totally declassified. It tropical depression considered dissipated. Just some wet weather moving into Mexico, although it did cause a lot of rain as it was around for a while. Earlier today, a hurricane, now totally gone, totally dissipated. Do keep an eye here, though. This is Hurricane Lester. Currently 300 miles to the southwest of Manzanillo, Mexico, with sustained winds around 90 miles per hour, moving west-northwest around 9. The good thing about this, if there is a good thing about this hurricane, its west-northwesterly motion takes it further away from land, meaning not looking at a threat, not really going to crank up the water too much, not going to pose too much of a threat. Even the heavy-duty rains that were of a great concern, with amazing rain totals, many 5 to 10 inch amounts reported here. Now that that's over with, we're going to move this further away and hopefully keep it moving in that direction. It still could intensify, not out of the question, make it a little bit stronger, but it's moving away from land. That's the best part of that. You can even see some of that darker red right there. That's the convection. That's the highest, coldest part of the storm, with the storminess, heavy-duty rains here, kind of the northeastern side of it, the northern third, the worst of it here, again, away from land. At one point we had tropical depression.
Good morning, and thank you so much for joining us on the Weather Channel. 10 minutes before the hour, you have tuned in just in time for Storm Watch as we detail the threat for severe storms today. There's not a large threat, but we could find the heavy rain that we've seen in Texas kind of retrograde back west into New Mexico. We'll talk more about that. Also, we have the very latest on the tropics for you. Our tropical update will start everything for you as we detail the latest conditions. Let's show you the tropical update. This edition of Storm Watch is sponsored by Prestone. Touchstone, as we look at the overall climatology for the month of October, the middle of October anyway. Each of these dots represents where we've had tropical development over the last 100 years or so, and we've had about 74 storms to develop, but you do notice where the storms originated. They've been generally concentrated in the western Gulf of Mexico, the central, the western Atlantic, and the Bay of Campeche here. We've had some activity over the last 100 years. Now, from the 21st to the 31st of October, still the areas where the most active tropical weather has been over the last 100 years has been basically in the western Atlantic, the Caribbean, and the Bay of Campeche. We haven't had much activity based on climatology for the eastern Atlantic closer to the African coast. That's because this time of year we start to look less toward the African coast because upper air winds are generally out of the west, very strong, and inhibiting any tropical waves from coming off of the African coast and pushing them westward. So we're kind of winding down with the Cape Verde season, and that means the area closer to the African coast. So it's not as active this time of year. You can see actually how these clouds are moving off to the north and east, and that's representative of those very strong northwest winds. So we won't focus on the eastern Atlantic, we'll focus on the western Atlantic, where based on climatology, these areas are more favorable. Quiet conditions right now, the northern Gulf of Mexico, and for the most part the Bay of Campeche, but we have been watching the western Caribbean now. Here we've noticed an area of low pressure, about 1,009 millibars, spinning here off the coast of Mexico, the Yucatan Peninsula. We've been watching this system, but also an upper level low kind of spinning off to the south and west of that system, and this upper level low has been inhibiting any development from this area of low pressure in the western Gulf of Mexico. That's one thing, but if this area of low pressure in the upper levels continues to move west, it could start to relinquish its influence on this area of low pressure in the western Gulf, and we could start to set up a scenario that is more favorable for development from this system. And as that happens, we could eventually find this system moving to the north and eventually east and bring squally weather to southern Florida. That's in response to that huge trough of low pressure that will be building over the eastern half of the country. So we have several things to watch from this area of low pressure in the western Caribbean over the next 48 hours, but nothing imminent threatening here, the western Caribbean. We'll keep you posted. A tropical wave over the eastern Caribbean right now. It's not organized, just bringing some squally weather for the open waters, the eastern Caribbean, and we've had some squally conditions over the northern Leeward Islands as well. Other than that, things are pretty quiet again across the Atlantic basin because we don't focus on the eastern Atlantic this time of year. What about the eastern Pacific? Well, here we've been watching Lester as it continues to churn off the coast of Mexico. Lester is a hurricane with winds of 100 miles an hour, expected to increase as we go through time. Now it's moving west to northwest, but over the next 48 hours it could start to veer more north, and that could influence its path toward the Baja of Southern California, the peninsula here, Cabo San Lucas. We'll keep you posted on that. Hurricane Lester now moving west-northwest. We've also been watching Typhoon Babs. It will follow the path of Zeb, remember last week, over northern Luzon with heavy rains.
Every day is new. We tell you about the weather right now. How will it affect where you're headed? What about your plans? People count on us to get them through the day. I love that.
This program was sponsored by Touchstone Energy. We are America's electric cooperatives.
Partnership means growth. That's the way it's been for America's electric co-ops and America's businesses and communities. We've always kept affordable power flowing steadily and reliably. Now, we're joining other local co-ops to form a nationwide alliance, Touchstone Energy, to ensure state-of-the-art technology and personalized service. It's the power of human connections. We are America's electric cooperatives.
Sports cars are great if you're into leather and chrome. But let's hope you're not into wood.
Thanks for joining us for Storm Watch. I'm meteorologist Mark Mancuso. Very heavy rains past couple of days and making for disastrous flooding in parts of South Texas. We'll check that radar out in just a moment. First, let's check on the tropics. And with your tropical update, here's Mr. John Hope.
Well, thank you, Mark, and glad to have you with us today. Well, in the tropics, we're in the third week in October. We still don't have very much happening in the way of any immediate development, but we do have 2 or 3 areas, 2 especially of interest. One is down here in the Central Caribbean, just north of Curacao and Aruba and Bonaire. Another one is here in the northwestern Caribbean Sea, just coming into the Yucatan Channel. And I'll tell you, both of these are showing some signs of organization. The Hurricane Center was going to send a reconnaissance aircraft out there if necessary today. They're not sending one out, but they may send one out tomorrow, and they may send one down to this area as well, so we'll keep you updated on that. This is kind of unusual to see something down here this far south in the Caribbean. I'll focus on that more in just a second. Now, looking at the climatology, this is the 11th to the 20th, and this is the last day for this. You'll notice during that 10-day period over 110 years that the big concentration was here in the southwestern Caribbean Sea. As a matter of fact, about half the storms that ever developed did develop there. But as we go into another 10-day period, you see we don't have nearly as many to begin with. We only have 40 storms, and we don't quite have that concentration. They're more scattered at random over a very wide area. Well, let's go ahead now and examine that area we talked about in the Yucatan Channel. We've been watching this move out of the Caribbean. It's moving mostly toward the west, and if there's a low pressure center here at all, we think it's over land in the Yucatan Peninsula, although it's getting stretched out pretty much east and west. And this is going to move toward the west, and it does have some potential, we think, for development in the next 24 hours. But down the road a ways, we're going to have a cold front come in the Gulf, and that might sort of be the end of that, so we'll just have to watch. Now, here again is the area we talked about in the Yucatan Channel, and down here, here are the ABC Islands. This has gone off to the west of there now, and there's really a pretty good counterclockwise rotation there that we can see, and so we're watching that with a considerable amount of interest. They did briefly have some pretty good southwest winds even in Curacao this morning, and they picked up more than 1.5 inches of rain in a 6-hour period. That's kind of a dry island normally. And the other area, not quite so concerned about this yet anyway, because of upper level westerly winds, but an area several hundred miles east of the islands has flared up a little bit. As far as farther west, these disturbances look pretty active for this time of year, but this late in the season, we would not expect to see any development at all from that quarter. Now, Lester here is really holding its own very well. Top winds now up to 105 miles an hour, and it is moving on toward the west, northwest about 12 miles an hour, a little faster than it was, and there's some indication it might turn with time a little bit more toward the north, so we are concerned about the possibility that this could get close enough to the southern tip of Baja to be of some concern. Right now it doesn't seem well. Let's see, we've got a little glitch in the pictures here. Right there on the last one, though, you can see where the circulation center is. And here then the particular centered at 15.4 and 105.6, and that is 260 miles southwest of Manzanillo, Mexico. Top winds 105 miles per hour. And now we're going to take you out into the western Pacific Ocean, if we can get out there. We're going to take a look at Babs out there. Babs now a super typhoon with winds up to 155 miles an hour. And I'm afraid in a couple days it's going right over Luzon again, and we'll have to watch that very carefully. That's the tropics. Now back to Mark Mancuso.
All right, thank you, John. And closer to home, we still have problems in Texas here. Heavy rains have shifted away from South Texas, but we still have reports of disastrous flooding occurring on these rivers: the Colorado River, Navidad River, Lavaca River, Guadalupe River, the San Antonio River, and around Cibolo Creek. So down here in South Texas, lots of major problems with the high waters on these rivers. And in the city of Victoria and around San Antonio Bay, a disastrous flooding is occurring right now. So all the water headed down towards the coast. Latest radar shows a heavier rain shifting into northeast Texas and into west Texas as tropical moisture from the old Hurricane Madeline moves into the area. Stay with us. Weather Center is coming right up.
Texans have to contend with yet another day of floodwaters. Will the rain end anytime soon? The full story on Weather Center after your local forecast.
You don't get in this kind of shape running on a treadmill. You do it with strength exercise, and I do it with a Bowflex. You know, if you're not working out with strength training right now, you need to. Because if you want to lose weight, you got to add the muscle, and that's why you need a Bowflex machine. It's like nothing else you've ever tried before. We've got over 60 exercises you can do on a Bowflex. You're never going to get bored. You can do a full workout in 20 minutes on a Bowflex.
Rain continues in Texas today, although the flooding should be subsiding with time. The heaviest rain today is out of the San Antonio-Austin area, but we'll show you in just a moment on the Storm Watch. But first, it's time for your tropical update, and for that, we have Dr. Steve Lyons.
Well, thank you, Jill, and welcome to the Tropical Update. We've got a super typhoon in the western Pacific, a hurricane in the eastern Pacific, and a few disturbances in the Atlantic that we're going to show you today. Let's start in the Atlantic, and I'll show you a long loop here that's about a 2-day loop. We can see sort of the morphology of what's gone on here over the last couple of days. The big system that we've been monitoring here has been the one in the northwestern Caribbean Sea here. And if you look at it, you can see that there's an upper level low pressure system that's associated with the surface low. The surface low is now right over the peninsula here, and the upper level low is just to the southwest of the Yucatan Peninsula. So the upper level low seems to be dominating the whole system right now and is associated with this big arc of high cloud. That's not associated with big, strong, low pressure center out there. Got a couple of other clusters out in here we'll zoom in on, and of course here's our hurricane out here in the eastern Pacific. That's Hurricane Lester. Well, this time of year, keep in mind, this is now October 21st to the 31st, and what we see there is a rapid decline in the number of tropical cyclones, none of which develop out here in the eastern Atlantic, most of which develop in the western Atlantic and a few in the Caribbean and Gulf. So we're on the downhill climb now, which is good news, but we're not quite there yet, and in that process, let's see what we've got. The Gulf of Mexico here, it's fairly clear to the north, a frontal boundary coming down here. You can see it just south of Atlanta here, coming down toward Houston, and it's actually come down off the coast here. That's going to interact with this surface low, and it's going to prevent it from coming up into the central portion of the country, and it'll probably keep it from developing much as well. So we're not too worried about this, but we'll monitor it for you. A lot of thunder shower activity, and associated with that, some fairly strong winds here in these thunderstorms, gushing to over 30 miles per hour there in the latest observations out there in the southeastern Gulf of Mexico. As we go farther into the central Gulf, we have this area of disturbed weather here, and we've been monitoring. It was associated with an upper level trough in here. That trough has very rapidly decreased, and I think we'll see a slow decrease in the thunderstorm activity as well, although we do have a low-level perturbation there, perturbation meaning a trough of low pressure there, but I don't think we're going to see too much out of this, but we'll monitor it for you. Now out in the central Atlantic, we have two features, one over the islands here. You can see the islands right in through here, Puerto Rico about right there. And this is associated with a surface trough and an upper level feature. And the upper level feature is producing a very sharp turning of the wind field, and that's anchoring that thunder shower activity right over those northern Leeward Islands there. And that should not move too much, but we don't expect development from that either. Another area of thunderstorms here, but that's embedded within southwesterly flow aloft, and we don't expect development there either. The same off the coast of Africa here, you can see a few areas of clusters, but embedded in deep, deep southwesterly flow, and that's good news. Now out here in the eastern Pacific, here's the coast of Mexico here. Here's our hurricane. This is Hurricane Lester moving off to the west-northwest. It was a little more intense. We could see a well-defined eye earlier today. Now on the infrared imagery here, you see a center about right here, but not a clearly defined eye. The latest statistics here as of 2 p.m., 15.8 north, 106.6 west, or about 260 miles southwest of Manzanillo, Mexico here. Winds 105 miles per hour, but it's looking like it's weakening. Continues to move to the west-northwest, and it could take a track a little more to the northwest, and as it does so, it should weaken if it does do that. And finally, out in the western Pacific, we've been monitoring Super Typhoon Babs. That means the winds are up there about 155 miles per hour. It's about ready to impact the Philippine Islands there. There you see the eye, and it's going to take a similar track to what Zeb did, and we'll keep you informed on that. Now let's get back to Jill with the rain potential in Texas.
All right, thanks, Steve. The satellite picture back at home shows you a
a broad southwesterly flow, and that picks up actually some of that moisture from Hurricane Lester that Steve was showing you. And that's been coming up. First it was Hurricane Madeline, now Lester, helping to bring more moisture into the southern plains. Fortunately, there's been a little shift in the activity, and the rain is a little bit farther north, so South Texas getting a break today. Strong thunderstorms possible, but not a big deal. Those would be in Colorado, New Mexico, or maybe Florida. This is the spot we've been watching, and fortunately, that corridor on Interstate 35 is dry today, but we'll check out current conditions and show you some video from the area coming up.
In parts of Texas, the waters are rising and the rain is still falling. Is there any relief in sight? More on this, plus the national outlook coming up on Weather Center.
Hi, I'm George Foreman, and this is my lean, mean, fat-reducing grilling machine. It grills delicious food in a healthy way, fast. And now I've teamed up with the folks at Sears to make my grill better than ever. We've added this unique, handy warming lid, so preparing tasty meals is even easier.
George Foreman's grill cooks from both sides at once, cutting most cooking times in half. The slanted grill channels fat and grease away from food. The floating hinge lets me grill.
Another super typhoon threatens the Philippines tonight with winds of 155 miles per hour. Closer to home, a hurricane off the Mexican coast has our eye, but it is moving away from land. And there's a weak disturbance moving across the Yucatan Peninsula that could potentially throw some more rain into Texas. This is Storm Watch, sponsored by Touchstone Energy. I'm Dave Schwartz. It's 9 minutes before the hour. Let's start off our tropical update with a look at the Atlantic Basin. And as you see, there's a lot of energy out there. A big swirl to the clouds out here in the Gulf of Mexico in association with an upper level area of low pressure. Let's get in closer and have a look at this thing. Now the surface low is somewhere in here. Now what I mean by surface low, that is where the lowest pressure is. If we were all out there with the barometers. That's where we'd be most concerned. Where's the surface low? A hurricane is a surface low. A tropical storm has a surface low. The center of the spin, converging air, rising air. But the swirl, the general swirl that you see right here in a cyclonic, counterclockwise fashion, is an upper level feature. Down near the surface, at the surface low, there's very little in the way of shower activity. A couple of showers. Pressures have not been falling here lately, and we do not anticipate much in the way of development. Some strengthening is possible here over the next couple of days, but at the same time, there's a cold front that sits out here over the Gulf of Mexico. That will settle southward. This will come into contact with it, and that should just about be the end of any tropical development. A much stronger cold front heads southward into the Gulf of Mexico here on Friday. But there is the potential so that some of this tropical moisture could work its way into South Texas where we've had so much flooding. There's also the potential that this might kind of hook a right as that next cold front comes down, hook up with it and bring some tropical moisture here to Florida. That's one of the questions here as we work our way into the midweek. We'll keep you posted on that. Central Caribbean is showing all clear. There is a trough of low pressure, pretty sharp trough of low pressure, and some showers have fired up on the leading edge of that. This is not a tropical feature per se. And out here in the eastern Caribbean, also some showers in association with a trough and a surface feature that's migrating slowly toward the east. Showery weather for the rest of tonight and Wednesday for the leeward and windward islands. And here in the rest of the Atlantic Basin, some very strong westerly winds are just shearing anything that tries to develop apart. Now that's the Atlantic Basin. In the Pacific, there are organized tropical systems. This a hurricane, this is Mexico. And Manzanillo, Mexico, would be up here somewhere. And to the southwest of Manzanillo is Hurricane Lester, the center of the low-level circulation, or the eye of Hurricane Lester. at 16 degrees north, 107.4 west. It is moving away from land, and the trek toward the west-northwest or northwest is likely the next couple of days. Northwest could take it perilously close to Baja California. So if you are watching us on a satellite dish from there, be apprised of the upcoming motion of Hurricane Lester. 105-mile-per-hour winds. But once again, it cannot hold a candle to the super typhoon that is brushing the southeast coast of the Philippines right there. There's the eye, 14-mile wide eye of Typhoon Babs, 155-mile-per-hour winds. It's moving so slowly. Not only is the wind damaging, but the rainfall will be incredible. That's your tropical update. Speaking of incredible rain, we've seen it here in Texas, and the good news is that the incredible rain is gone. It's moved to the west and also moved up here into Oklahoma. Not that it's incredible. Raining right now in Dallas, raining in Oklahoma City, but the flooding continues in parts of southeastern Texas. Eventually, it will dry out here. The forecast is next.
Rain is a welcome relief in dry parts of Texas, while residents in other areas wait for floodwaters to subside. An update on both areas next on Weather Center.
This program was sponsored by Touchstone Energy. We are America's electric cooperatives.
Partnership means growth. That's the way it's been for America's electric co-ops and America's businesses and communities. We've always kept affordable power flowing steadily and reliably. Now, we're joining other local co-ops to form a nationwide alliance, Touchstone Energy, to ensure state-of-the-art technology and personalized service. It's the power of human connections. We are America's electric co-op.